morning, my name is Josh from CyclonesOZ, and here is your detailed forecast update for January 22nd, 2025. A lot to get through today. We're going to be starting off with severe thunderstorms over the southeast of Queensland, heavy rainfall expected up in Queensland's far north, associated with the developing tropical low on the Coral Sea, and that tropical low is expected to at some point become a tropical cyclone as well. Two tropical lows that could become cyclones offshore from the Northern Territory and Western Australia as well, and we'll just briefly touch on Tropical Cyclone Sean as it spins itself up and dies off from the WA coastline. All of that plus more coming up in today's weather forecast. If you're brand new to the channel, please consider subscribing, but let's get stuck straight into things this morning with a brief overlook at the southeast of Queensland, and then I promise you we'll get stuck straight into Queensland's far north in just a few moments. But you can see over in Queensland's southeast, nothing really expected to happen throughout the course of today. Yes, there will be a few showers lingering here and there, and a couple of storms expected to develop later on this afternoon and evening, especially into the northeast of New South Wales. They'll cross over the border at around 4 or 5 p.m. tonight into the Gold Coast hinterland, and areas around the Gold Coast could be receiving a couple of good thunderstorms later on this afternoon and evening. And you can see here on the convective forecast models there will be some heavier showers and storms around. They will be lingering, like I said, most commonly across the northeastern corners of New South Wales and right onto the border, but they could extend over the state and into Queensland or between a line of Warwick across the Gold Coast. They won't be too intense though. We're not expecting a severe thunderstorm outbreak for either the Gold Coast or the Brisbane areas, but a couple of good thunderstorms are nonetheless expected here and there, and some isolated heavy falls expected not only into the northeast of New South Wales but across the Gold Coast hinterland and then up to about Ipswich, and then a couple of storms here and there as we get further north through the Sunshine Coast that could deliver some good rainfall, but again I wouldn't be betting the farm on significant falls there. The main risks, if these thunderstorms do go severe warned, is going to be damaging winds. There will be isolated pockets of moderate to heavy rainfall here, but I don't think they'll be enough to constitute what could be a severe thunderstorm outbreak. Tomorrow afternoon though, you can see as we skip right out to tomorrow afternoon, some really good thunderstorms are expected, and that's going to be from a low pressure system sweeping across the New South Wales state. This low pressure system will then get itself offshore, and a surface trough will develop across the southeast of Queensland, and not only is it going to be very hot tomorrow afternoon, where we'll be seeing temperatures into the early to mid 30s across parts of Queensland southeast around Brisbane and the Gold Coast, and that's just going to be perfect fuel for these thunderstorms to blow up, and they will be some strong thunderstorms, especially along the Sunshine Coast ahead of this front here, which will be kind of trailing a line here behind these areas, and once it gets to about 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, then we're going to be seeing thunderstorms far up ahead of it, and by 1 or 2 o'clock it looks like the frontal system is going to be kind of between Injune and Brisbane, just along this line here, and as such Brisbane and the Gold Coast not really expecting anything in the way of strong severe thunderstorms tomorrow afternoon, but the Sunshine Coast, wow, they could be getting an absolute belting here. Some really good thunderstorms are on the forecast up there, not really reciprocated between other forecast models though. I mean, you can see the Eastern BF model here really kind of not inclined to present the risk of some powerful thunderstorms. The Axis has been calling for these strong storms into the Sunshine Coast for quite a while, but we could also be seeing some good thunderstorms right down to the Queensland New South Wales border, and the GFS has also been calling for a pocket of thunderstorms as well. The conditions certainly going to be there though. I mean, take a look at the convective available potential energy, especially along the Sunshine Coast. We're talking about values into the high 3000s and early 4000s in some places. Now that is jet fuel stuff for thunderstorms here to fire up, and plenty of them will do so and make the most of it along the Sunshine Coast. We'll also be seeing isolated pockets of thunderstorms right up to about Rockhampton, and there'll be again good convective available potential energy values right up to Rockhampton, and as such severe thunderstorms also a possibility up there, but definitely at their most likely in this general area where I'm circling right now. Brisbane and the Gold Coast look like they're going to dodge it, but there could be a couple of stronger thunderstorms just adjacent in towards Toowoomba, Warwick, and right down towards Wangara onto the New South Wales and Queensland border. Pretty much anywhere along what we call the dry line, which is kind of the difference between the cooler, moister air closer to the coastline and that stifling hot, dry desert air further inland. I mean, take a look at this. Charleville expecting a top of 44 degrees tomorrow. The dry line is where these colours change from grey to the rainbow basically on this map here, and that's where the thunderstorms will be firing up along this line here and then further towards the east, and certainly does look like a very favourable environment for these thunderstorms to fire up, mark my words. Very significant night of thunderstorms could be possible later on tomorrow night, and certainly something that we'll take a look at in great detail in tomorrow morning's forecast update. Also, I would just like to say a few showers also possible around the Gold Coast metro area early tomorrow morning, probably at around sort of 8, 9 to 10 a.m. in the morning. Some heavier falls are possible around the Gold Coast area, expanding up towards Brisbane, but I don't really see more than 30 or 40 millimetres coming through there. Depending on what rainfall streams in ashore, it'll be interesting to see, but like I said, 30 to 40 millimetres does look like kind of the maximum amount of rainfall that's going to be coming throughout the course of tomorrow by the looks of things. And also might I say that the maximum of 44 for Charleville's wrong. It's actually going to go up to 45. Same deal with Tambo as well. And a lot of places around the area, St George 45, Roma 44, Thallon 44, and then across the border, Lightning Ridge 41. It is going to be be a hot one tomorrow across southeastern and south central Queensland. Temperatures into the mid-40s expected to be very widespread, that's for sure, until those thunderstorms come in and kind of cool things off. And of course, that means that those temperatures are going to skyrocket on Friday as well for the southeast corner of Queensland under the influence of this low pressure system. High 30s, early 40s expected across the southeast of Queensland. Brisbane a top of 37 by the looks of things. Gold Coast a slightly cooler 34, but coupled with humidity values that are going to be 30 to 40%. It looks like the heat index could be well into the 40s by tomorrow afternoon. Also, excellent convective available potential energy values just offshore, and unfortunately, with that being just offshore, it doesn't look like they're expecting too much of a meaty thunderstorm outbreak. There will certainly be some severe thunderstorms in the vicinity tomorrow, on Friday afternoon rather, across the southeastern corners of Queensland, especially up on the Sunshine Coast and into the central areas of Queensland, but they're not going to be widespread, and this is certainly going to be a forecast that I'm going to take a look at in great detail on Friday morning, just to make sure nothing kind of catches us by surprise. Looking further out into the future, there's thunderstorms here and there along the Sunshine Coast and into the south, into the central areas of Queensland. But for the southeast, it looks like we're going to be waiting until February for our next proper thunderstorm outbreak there. And in fact, it doesn't look like it's going to come from thunderstorms; it's going to come from rainfall. But I'm spoiling the later parts of the video, so let's leave the southeast of Queensland now and jump up into Queensland's far north. Only 5 days now until the rainfall is expected to really pipe up there. It's really going to start to feel quite muggy and quite wet up there pretty quickly. Already starting to see some showers building along the Coral Sea, and got a comment from Daryl over in Mount Carbine saying that it was overcast, and it really does feel like something is beginning to build now across the Cape York Peninsula and especially across the Cassowary Coast. So we've got some big time rainfall accumulations coming in, so let's break that down in great detail in the forecast right now. So over the next couple of days, nothing in the way of significant weather is expected. It's going to be until this weekend minimum until we start to see these showers pipe up. From about Sunday mid-morning into Sunday afternoon, we're going to be seeing some steady showers, light to moderate rainfall expected to start materialising across the Cassowary Coast and the far northern reaches of Queensland in general. Rainfall piping up for locations between Townsville up to Cooktown. Now, it will be at its heaviest, of course, across the Cassowary Coast, and the rainfall gets progressively heavier through Sunday night and is moderate to intense by the looks of things late Sunday night into early Monday morning. Monday morning will be a little bit calmer, and then Monday evening that rainfall pipes up for good by the looks of things. Monday evening the rainfall is going to come in and it's going to stay for a couple of days. So for locations between Townsville right up towards Cooktown, especially on the Cassowary Coast between Cairns down to Ingham and Cardwell, some significant falls are expected to pipe up from Monday lunchtime, with heavy rainfall expected in the area from Monday evening. Now, this heavy rainfall will continue through Monday night into Tuesday morning, through Tuesday into Wednesday, Thursday, and then the rainfall again pipes up quite heavy again after it drops off a little bit Wednesday night. The rainfall pipes up heavy again on Thursday evening as a tropical low begins to develop off the Cape York Peninsula. Now, depending on where this tropical low does develop, is going to have major ramifications for where the heaviest falls are going to be, but by the looks of things, it's going to develop just to the north of the Cassowary Coast, somewhere offshore from the Daintree Rainforest or offshore from Hopevale or Cooktown, and as such, the rainfall is just going to be dragged into the Cassowary Coast. So once again, after a couple of days of heavy rainfall on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, Thursday slightly drier, and then from Friday evening onwards, heavy falls expected through Friday, Saturday, and Sunday as this tropical low begins development, and you can see that rainfall only begins to ease off on Sunday, the 2nd of February. So kind of two big blocks of really heavy rainfall here, separated by probably only a 24-hour window sometime on Thursday and into Friday morning, where the rainfall will temporarily ease off a little bit, but still, regardless, some very heavy falls are expected. This is the type of rainfall that's going to cause widespread accumulations of 150 millimetres a day and then pockets of 300 millimetres a day across the Cassowary Coast, and that's just going to build and build and build on top of each other. So these are all going to be cumulative rainfall accumulations, and as such, we're going to be seeing some pretty big time flooding, moderate riverine flooding pretty much expected now into the dying days of January across the Cassowary Coast, especially between Innisfail and Cairns. The rivers there already have water in them, and this rainfall here is just really going to tip them over the edge, and major riverine flooding can also be expected in these areas here. And we're now getting to the point where if you live in a flood-prone area, I certainly would be starting to take this weather event quite seriously, especially the rainfall coming in between Monday and Thursday. That rainfall's pretty much set in stone at this time. That rainfall is probably not going to be enough to cause major riverine flooding across the Cassowary Coast, especially. I reckon that will only kind of peak out minor to maybe moderate on the Bureau of Meteorology scale up there, so we'll be keeping a close eye on things. But if that tropical low does form into the first couple of days of February and funnels in a ton of rainfall ashore into the Cassowary Coast, which is looking very likely at this time, especially considering other forecast models are expecting it to develop not only offshore from the Cassowary Coast, but also funnel in that really significant rainfall that we've been talking about. The GFS are really fond of that situation now. And we'll get to the tropical cyclone forecast in just a moment, by the way. We're just solely focused on rainfall at this time. But yeah, if this rainfall does come in again, we get that second burst of rainfall between the 31st of January and the 3rd of February, then major flooding can be all but expected across the Cape coast. I mean, they'll probably end up receiving about 700 or 800 millimetres between Monday across to Wednesday or Thursday. So any rainfall on top of that in a short amount of time will cause some really serious problems, that's for sure. Let's break down those rainfall accumulations right now. I know that's what everyone is waiting for. So again, piping up Sunday night and then dying off on Thursday, I believe we said it was. So we'll go right out to the end of Thursday. This is just 4-day rainfall accumulations, and again from the EastMWF model, so it is a dramatic low ball on what's actually expected as well. 200 millimetres here. Of course, it's much less than what we were talking about, but we're talking about a much different time frame. So pushing the forecast right out, you can see we're still at that consistent 400 to 500 millimetres on the forecast. But as I've said, with the Cape coast, dramatically higher rainfall accumulations are expected. I mean, on the forecast, we're only looking at about 10 to 15 millimetres of rain every 3 hours, but we know that that's not going to happen. We know that it's going to be up to 10 times that amount across the Cape coast, and as such, rainfall accumulations should be approaching, if not exceeding, 4 figures over the course of this rainfall event, which mind you is only going to be around for a week. So 4-figure rainfall accumulations plus for some of these areas over a week, you're going to be averaging about 150 millimetres a day, give or take. And like I said, on the wettest of days, which right now are looking on both Tuesday and Wednesday, and then Friday through Saturday, the 31st and the 1st of February respectively, it looks like we could be seeing daily rainfall accumulations there well in excess of 2 to 250 millimetres, and probably pockets of high rainfall accumulations around Fishery Falls or Berlin and Kerr. So again, we'll be keeping a very close eye on things here. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like the rainfall is going to penetrate too far inland. The Atherton tablelands do pick up some respectable quantities of rainfall, about 150 millimetres or so. Atherton and Ravenshoe both expecting at least 100 millimetres a pop there. But as you get further inland out towards Chilago, 100 millimetres there. Mount Carbine will likely receive a little bit more, up to about 150 or 200 millimetres of steady rainfall. But yeah, once you get over that initial coastal range on both the Daintree side of things and into the Cape coast, that's it. The rainfall will basically be stopping there. Cairns expecting a healthy 250 millimetres. I reckon that's still a little bit on the low side. I reckon Cairns will end up with about 350 to 400 millimetres. Port Douglas and the Daintree rainforest should also pick up 4-figure rainfall accumulations, albeit if they do, it'll be much lower than the rainfall accumulations along the Cape coast. I reckon a pretty accurate number for the wettest areas along the Daintree rainforest coastline around Mossman and Port Douglas would be somewhere between that 600 to 800 millimetres at this time. Shouldn't get too much more rainfall unless you get a little bit further inland and into the right mountain valley. Regardless, that's still some very heavy rainfall as well. And then further south down through Ingham and Cardwell, about 300 millimetres apiece there, but the rainfall stops pretty much at Ingham, stops on a dime there, and depending on the motion of this tropical low, it looks like Townsville could get either 50 millimetres of rainfall or 500 millimetres of rainfall. So the forecast south of Ingham is very, very uncertain at this time. So let's get into that longer range forecast right now. If you've got any questions on the flooding concerns up in the far northern reaches of Queensland, let me know in the comment section down below, or feel free to flick me an email too, and I'll be happy to answer your question. But now let's talk about this tropical low / tropical cyclone and what it is expected to do. Now, the EastMWF forecast, which is kind of my favourite forecast at this time, considering it's been kind of the mix of the forecast for the last couple of days, is a weak tropical low / tropical cyclone developing from a very broad low pressure system in the Coral Sea. It's going to be a very slow organising system, a very messy one. In fact, it's going to resemble quite similar to Tropical Cyclone Kirrily of pretty much this time last year in its developmental stages, really taking its time to spin up, really broad to initially begin with, and also pretty weak by the looks of things. So this system here then wraps itself up from a tight area of low pressure. We'll likely see another low pressure system split off, and that will be the one that drives the rainfall up into the Cape coast as well. But sometime on Saturday or Sunday, the 1st or 2nd of February respectively, we'll likely see this tropical low develop somewhere in the Coral Sea and pretty close to the Queensland coastline at that. It'll then parallel the Queensland coastline by the looks of things, and then deliver rainfall right across the eastern coast of Queensland, and some pretty big rainfall accumulations as well. For locations between Mackay right down to Bundaberg and into the northern areas of the Sunshine Coast, they do pick up some pretty significant falls by the looks of things. Again, though, this forecast needs to be taken with a very heavy pinch of salt. It's an interesting track to say the least for this system here, and considering it doesn't actually have that much in the way of model support anymore, I mean, the Axis has not been calling for this for quite a while, and between other forecast models as well, the GFS and the Axis forecast model are lining up pretty much perfectly at this time. I think the EastMWF forecast might be a bit of a boogie run by the looks of things. I don't really think it's going to materialize. as the way that the forecasts are suggesting, which is good because the Eastern Beth is not only going to be a really confusing system and a hard system to forecast, but it's also going to be a problematic one, delivering rainfall right along the Queensland coastline and a whole lot of it as well. And for those of you struggling with rainfall across the central areas of Queensland, 300 millimetres over 24 hours is probably not the rainfall that you want right now, especially if you've got baked dry ground. I think the situation with the scenario where the GFS is saying here, which is where this tropical low develops into a tight tropical cyclone, actually, albeit offshore from the Cape York Peninsula and then slides down the Cassowary coast, of course funneling the heavy falls into the Cassowary coast and the Daintree rainforest as well, and then actually making landfall as a tropical cyclone somewhere along the Queensland coastline, by the looks of things somewhere between Cairns right down towards Mackay or Rockhampton here. Again, we're looking very long range into the future, so take this forecast with a heavy pinch of salt, and it will actually change and flip-flop from here and there, but I am saying now that there is a tropical cyclone potential somewhere between Cairns down towards Rockhampton, again making that landfall between Townsville and Mackay on this forecast here, as probably a Category 2, pushing Category 3 strength severe tropical cyclone. It'll be a very similar intensity to Tropical Cyclone Kirrily again of this time last year, and again they'll be delivering very heavy rainfall, but once again it'll be in a very concentrated situation here between Cardwell right down towards Rockhampton. That's where the really concentrated heavy falls are expected. Now I do like this forecast a little bit more, not only because it does make a little bit more sense. I mean, this would be a very valued track of a tropical cyclone. Tropical cyclones do this track time and time again, but there's also a lot of other model support on this. The Axis G3 calling for a pretty much neck and neck as well. More of a mix in terms of a big tropical low system to spin up into the Coral Sea, which is what the Eastern F is also saying, but between the GFS and the Axis G3, they're calling for more or less the exact same thing in terms of low pressure system location and what rainfall is expected and the intensity of this tropical cyclone or tropical low as it begins to develop. So I'm very eager to see over the coming couple of days what this system is expected to do. I'm not going to have a valid answer on this. I'm not going to have a definite answer, rather, on this until this weekend. This system is still up in arms at this point. The rainfall's set in stone over the next couple of days across the Cassowary coast and the Cape York Peninsula as a whole, but the tropical low and tropical cyclone landfall situation along the Queensland coastline is not set in stone at all. And I would also like to ask everyone a favour, but if you see any comments or any posts on Facebook or any other social media platform that's calling for a direct hit on Queensland or saying that there's a high chance of a direct hit on Queensland over the next 14 days, they are talking out of their rear end. It is not going to be a high chance at this time, and it's not going to be a high chance until we see other forecast models really jump on board with this. This is a classic case of watch but don't panic across the Queensland coastline. If you do live between Cairns right down towards Rockhampton, I stand by the fact that there is now a slim chance of a tropical cyclone impact, but it is very much a case of watch and don't panic. Watch the forecasts very closely over the coming couple of days, and there is absolutely no need to panic, and the chances of a tropical cyclone impact right now are sitting in the low single-digit percentages, so very, very low at this time, likely to be upped, but again, very, very low, and things can change dramatically with the forecast. We're talking about the tropics, for heaven's sake. Things change very, very quickly with the tropical forecast, so we'll be watching it very closely, but again, stay tuned for more updates, and don't panic about these systems at all. I'll be able to give you a definitive answer on these systems and what is expected in terms of the Queensland tropical low and tropical cyclone impact on Saturday or Sunday this weekend. Anyways, that is enough for the Queensland coastline. Let's just briefly touch on this system here up in the Gulf of Carpentaria. Again, I don't really buy this system either from the GFS. The GFS has been calling for a tropical cyclone to spawn somewhere in the Gulf of Carpentaria into the dying days of January, into the very early days of February by the looks of things, but other forecast models not overly keen with it right now, and especially considering other forecast models are actually suggesting a West Australian tropical cyclone as well, or a cyclone offshore from WA into the last few days of January and into the first few days of February. It'd be highly unusual to see a tropical cyclone offshore from Western Australia, one in the Gulf of Carpentaria, and then one just offshore from Queensland. That really doesn't happen because Australia, as big as we think that we are, we're pretty small when it comes to weather systems. You can't really have 3 tropical cyclones dotting the Australian coastline. It's happened before, but it's very unusual, and all these systems will be interacting quite heavily with each other, which is normally a very bad thing for tropical cyclones and tropical cyclone intensification. So Gulf of Carpentaria system, Northern Territory tropical cyclone, not likely at this time, but monsoonal arrival for Darwin, very much likely over the coming couple of days. They've already had a very late start to the monsoon. In fact, it hasn't really felt like a true monsoon across the Northern Territory so far this wet season, but it looks like they're going to get some good rainfall coming through into the dying days of January and into the first week of February, not only from thunderstorms, but also from some steady rainfall that's expected to develop across the first 5 days of February. And you can see here rainfall accumulations across the northern areas of the Northern Territory from Australia Day onwards, looking pretty healthy now across some of these locations, up to about 200 millimetres or so, but still absolutely nothing crazy. The runaway rainfall is of course going to be across the Cape York Peninsula and the Cassowary Coast over in Queensland, but for the Northern Territory, still some respectable totals expected, still much below average in terms of their rainfall there, and you can see, not on this map here, but the drought monitoring map across the Northern Territory, it's now starting to get really dry across some of these locations, which is quite concerning indeed. These soil moisture values should be well and truly into that 100 percentile area across the Northern Territory and Western Australia as a whole, but they're now starting to push into quite dry values here, and exceptional to extreme drought conditions are beginning to materialise. And just before we wrap this video up, I would just like to talk about the West Australian situation. Of course, we've still got Tropical Cyclone Sean offshore, if you can call it a tropical cyclone, that is. It's really struggling right now, this system here. Category 1 status still, but it's about to turn extratropical, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Bureau of Meteorology has completely killed it off its radar by the time this video comes out. No threat to Western Australia, the wind's not even beginning to pick up, but you can see that we do, based off these wind observations, have a low pressure system offshore. Northerly winds around the Geraldton and the Abrolhos Islands, and now southeasterly to easterly winds across the Perth metro area. Temperatures as well really high. It's certainly feeling like a tropical cyclone is offshore. 35 degrees in Brookton right now, 37 degrees in Hyden, and climbing quite rapidly. It was another boiling night across the Perth metro area, and I do not envy anyone without air conditioner or refusing to run air conditioner, because the heat actually resembled Pilbara heat over the last couple of days. It was that hot. It was absolutely awful in Perth, and it's the nights that really did get us down here. We're built for warm weather, and of course waiting for the it's summer comments, that's for sure, but certainly that kind of heat where we're talking about 12 to 14 degrees Celsius above average, that is exceptional. Not record breaking, but still exceptional heat, that's for sure. The future of Tropical Cyclone Sean is pretty certain. It's just going to keep on heading further towards the south-southeast, and it's going to die off. A couple of showers possible later on this weekend as the system passes well to the south of the Perth metro area and the southwest corner of Western Australia. I think the main conditions that Sean is going to be bringing is a bit of a reprieve to the heat across Western Australia, which would be very, very welcome indeed. And then looking much further out into the future, we have had the risk of a tropical cyclone or tropical low developing offshore from the WA coastline into early February. We're still calling for those two systems to develop well to the offshore, and it looks like these systems could also become quite strong, or have the potential to become quite strong. No threat to the West Australian mainland though, and between other forecast models you can see the GFS also calling for it much later on into the forecast period. So it'll be interesting to see what happens offshore from Western Australia. Certainly looks like a bit of a busy period for tropical cyclone and tropical low activity will happen into early January. But yeah, we have our hands tied with Queensland. A lot going on across the northern areas of Australia, so expect the daily forecast updates to continue. They're going to be coming through thick and fast for the foreseeable future. I'm really loving producing them, and if you've got any feedback or comments, then please do let me know in the comment section down below. Of course, photos, videos, anything, storms, hot weather, anything weather related that you'd like me to see, send it through to my email as well. I'd be more than happy to have a look at them and respond to you there, and respond to specific questions as well. A special shout out to the channel sponsors too. Their names are on screen right now. 2 new members as well over the last couple of days, so thank you so much to both of them for joining. And you can also join by clicking the join button down below and selecting the channel sponsor thing. It's the price of a coffee, and it really does help out around the channel here. It gets us access to all of this fancy software, so again, thank you so much to all of the channel sponsors. Their work is much appreciated. But that is all from me today, and I'll catch you all in the next storm. Goodbye.